Hello, everybody, and we're live. Hey there from
Hey,
me.
hello.
Hi guys, how are we doing? Hi chat people.
Positive guess as to what we're talking about tonight. No problem, Jay. Do what you got to do, which is spontaneous human combustion. Very interesting topic. I want a lesser known mystery, I suppose, in many ways for people when they talk about the supernatural or the unknown. Doesn't get as much exposure as it possibly should. Well, we're going to rectify that problem because that's exactly what we're like. We're going to hit you with facts, we're going to hit you with figures, and we're going to burn you right out with this topic tonight. We're ready to go. I'll give a little bit of a brief rundown and then I'll let loose the dogs of war, the guys here. And we'll go through a few cases and just have a general discussion about what we think's going on regarding spontaneous human combustion. Do you want to say hi again, everybody?
Hi.
Hey guys.
Hey, everyone.
Yeah, shut up, Damian.
Cool. I'll go last, says Damian, coolest guy in the room. Love it. Okay, so basic rundown. Spontaneous human combustion is the combustion of a living or recently deceased human being without any apparent ignition source or known scientific explanation. And there's said to have been over 200 cases in a period of over 300 years, or roughly around 300 years. First reported cases were in 1641, but spontaneous human combustion became better known in society in the 19th century because Charles Dickens used it to kill off one of the characters, Mr. Crook, in the 1853 novel Bleak House. Well known in literature and popular culture due to instances, I suppose, like the combustible drummers in This Is Spinal Tap. Drummers always setting on fire. 2 episodes of The X-Files and even more. I think even South Park done an episode on spontaneous human combustion, I believe.
I'm trying to think back through the 24 seasons or whatever it is to think, but I'm not sure.
I think pretty sure they did. But the first written account would go to a guy called Thomas Bartholin, unsure about the pronunciation. He would write an account in Latin while he was in Milan in 1654 about the Polish Knight, which is the only name that they've got for this unfortunate victim that Bartholin wrote about, who served Queen Bona Sforza, and forgive the pronunciation if it's incorrect, who was enjoying an evening of feasting and fine brandy. Remember that, you brandy drinkers? And the tale goes that he would pour a glass of this lovely, lovely drink and then pour another before taking a seat at the table with all the feast laid out before him. And then this unnamed knight would drink this brandy down, it'd go down his gullet into his stomach, as you would. And he would keep feeling the sensation of it rising back up as if the brandy wanted to come straight back up again. But on this particular occasion, when it opened, flames and fire apparently spewed out of his mouth, which totally engulfed him, burning him to a crisp. So there you go. That's a brief rundown about what spontaneous human combustion is about. Science sort of struggles to explain it. There are theories which we'll go into, and obviously outlandish theories that we'll also go into. Does anyone want to add anything to that before we move on at all?
Just for it properly to be spontaneous human combustions, and there's not supposed to be a like an ignition source, is it? Or a noble any accelerants or anything like that is supposed to be found.
Yeah.
Even though there's always an ignition source, like immediately next to the body in all the photos.
Yeah, that's the other thing, isn't it? Which we'll come to is that, it's like there isn't any possible explanation or reason why this could happen, and then lots of them are found next to fires
or smokers.
Yeah, there's
heavy
smoke.
Yeah.
That's boiling it. That's we're jumping to the end.
Stop that there.
Okay, well, I forgot to run the banner. I'll quickly run that before we change. There you go. You see, there was even homage. I know that. Is that French for cheese? There's even homage if you look at the thing going across the bottom there.
A brief history.
Yeah. There you go. Exactly.
The finest channel on YouTube, The Brief History.
Well, anyway, moving on. And we'll go through a few cases before we let loose with this one. Does anybody want to add anything to roughly that brief history, because we're really dealing with cases rather than actual facts per se, because of it being what it is.
I suppose in the sort of the Charles Dickens era, because of how sort of popularised the Bleak House novel was, didn't they kind of use spontaneous combustion as a sort of reason to sort of stop drinking and commit yourself to the church and follow the church's rules, I guess. So it was used as a sort of a sway to religion.
Yeah, Dickens was good at that. Writing stories with a moral.
Yeah, he weren't scared of rolling out the propaganda.
Hey, you know, to write a Christmas story. I mean, we wouldn't have Christmas if it wasn't for him. So
yeah,
that is another way of looking at it. Yeah.
So thank you, Charlie.
Chestnuts roasted on an open fire. Okay, so we'll.
It's Rudolph again, isn't it?
Yeah.
We'll have one or two. And what is spontaneous? Well, we don't know, so I'll probably cock the order of all these up, but we can go into this a little bit. Again, going off the notes. What is it? Well, we don't know, do we? That's why, we don't.
That's why we're talking about it.
Yeah, I'm not going to go off them. We're going to go off famous cases instead. Okay, so we'll just rock it. We don't need this. We don't need this kind of thing going up. So one of the first ones is Countess Cornelia Zangari Bandi. Exactly. 1731, this case. And apparently the Countess went to bed. I'm going to read this ad verbatim, as it were, off the notes. The Countess went to bed after her dinner, accompanied by her maid, who was helping her due to Cornelia feeling unwell. They spent 3 hours together talking in the bedroom until the Countess fell asleep, after which the maid went to her own room. The next day, the maid went to wake up the Countess because she was usually up bright and early. In this instance, she wasn't. And found her charred remains. The room was full of black soot, and the body of the Countess was reduced to a pile of ashes that was roughly 3 foot from the bed also. But her lower legs, 3 fingers, and the front of her skull remained. And the furniture in the room and the bed were not burned, but were covered in a smelly, greasy layer of the moist substance. And the substance had also gone onto the floor, through the floorboards, and run down the walls into the kitchen below, and even fell onto some food that was in the bed. So that was Countess Cornelia Zangari Bandi in 1731. And then there's Steve. Do you want to give us yours?
Oh, yeah. So, Mary Reeser. And this happened on July the 2nd, 1951. And there she is. Lovely picture of her there.
There's a foot. There she is.
Yeah.
Is that a Subway?
Subway.
Yeah, because I'm recognising the foot long.
I knew what was coming then.
I'm sorry.
Fantastic.
I couldn't steal the punchline from you. I had to wait for someone to bite.
Mary Marinara.
Yeah, Mary Marinara. That's a good one. Fantastic. Yeah. Oh, now I remember this being one of the first images that I saw of human combustion. So yeah. Anyway, July the 2nd, 1951, in St. Petersburg, in Florida, Mary Reeser, on that fateful night, she told her son, who was a doctor as well. So her son was a doctor, but she had taken 2 Seconal tablets to help her sleep because she had like problems sleeping and things like that. And these tablets are normally given to people like before an operation. So she told her son that she might have 2 more before she actually goes to bed. Excuse me. So she fell asleep in her armchair, and roughly about between 3 and 5 a.m., her landlady in the building where she lived could smell some smoke. She didn't really think anything of it until around about 8 o'clock in the morning. She was going to deliver Mary a telegram, and noticed that the smell was even worse. It was really bad. And also there was some soot that had sort of come out of the door frame and things like that, and up onto the ceiling in the hallway. So she went to open the door, and she couldn't touch the door handle because it was too hot for her to touch. So she eventually called calls the police. The police turn up, and they find Mary's remains, as we can see here. Just her left leg or lower leg intact with a slipper on. There was no charring or burn marks anywhere on the leg. Also, there was candles and that had melted on the windowsill, and the wicks were still standing up. 1 second, guys. I've just messed my notes up. Yeah. They also found, obviously, the burned remains of part of a skull as well, which had shrunk. Also, parts of her spine were visible, and obviously the foot that was left untouched. So, excuse me. For Mary Reeser to be in that state, she would have had to have burned at around about 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit for between 3 to 4 hours. The surrounding areas of the room were infected, apart from the corner where the chair was situated. There's a little bit of like black soot in the corner on the walls and the ceiling, and that was basically it. There was no other damage on the walls. There was no signs of smouldering, and there was no signs of any accelerants or flammables being used. But as Dave said earlier about the first case he mentioned there back in 1435, whenever it was, there were fatty substance found, in the rug. So they sent parts of the rug, parts of Mary's remains, like to get tested for any sort of combustibles or anything like that. Nothing was found at all. The detective, Cass Burgess, said it was one of the most perplexing cases that he'd ever had to deal with. Dr. Walton Krogman, professor of physical anthropology, was actually amazed and baffled, and he said that in his 30 plus fire investigations, he had never seen a skull shrink. He says that they normally swell up a little bit or explode. So he's never seen one before that shrunk. The FBI and the police later found out that the day before, Mary was seen smoking a cigarette. So the sort of official, if you like, sort of report is that she died from obviously falling asleep with a cigarette in her hand, and her night dress catching on fire, acting as a accelerant, if you like, really, and sort of whooshing her up in flames. 1 second. Yeah. So the case is still unsolved. It still remains a mystery. But there's a few what's the word I'm looking for? Characteristics within human spontaneous combustion. So they reckon it could be static electricity, bacteria, stress, obesity, and alcohol consumption. Yeah, and the case is still unsolved, and that was in 1951. So, yeah, a lot of people also believe, because her son was a doctor, that he possibly had something to do with it. But yeah, no. Yeah, very bizarre case.
Is it possible that she was a vampire? And you know, because you ever seen like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, this go.
Yeah,
is that a possibility?
The thing that I don't understand with all the cases is that are they dead before they catch fire? Because if you were
not sort of jumping ahead of ourselves a bit with that.
Yes, yeah, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah,
got to rein you in on that one. Cease.
Cease and desist.
Did you say you had a couple, Jay, that you want to talk about?
Yeah.
You want to do one and then we'll move on to somebody else and sort of spread it out.
Yeah, I'll jump back again because, like I say, I've got a question that goes to the second one, really. So, first of all, I started to research Michael Flatley, and I spent about 4 hours doing that, learning some dance moves and things. And then I realised I was researching the wrong guy, and it's actually Michael Flaherty, who was a 76-year-old Irish fella in Clareview Park, 22nd of December 2010, which is the main reason why I picked this, because it's actually a very modern case, which a lot of the other ones we're talking about from the 60s, 70s, etc. This is 2010. So Mr. Mannion, his neighbour, was awoken in the early hours of the 22nd of December with thick black smoke and the fire alarm sounded. They broke, with a couple of neighbours got together, they broke into Michael's house and found just thick black smoke everywhere. And they found Mr. Flaherty dead, burned alive, basically. He was lying on his back, head closest to the fireplace, and it was an open, old-fashioned fireplace. It wasn't a radiator, as you know. It was an old-fashioned open fireplace. The body had been completely burned. There's no accelerants found and little damage to the room, including the ceiling directly above the body and the floor underneath were pretty much intact, which is odd considering the amount of damage done to the body. The other reason why I was thinking this was quite interesting is because a lot of the cases we're going to talk about there, or we have already talked about, they talk about there's been no accelerants involved. But this is, like in the 60s, 50s, earlier. I was thinking that the forensic science, might have been, would have been sort of kind of limited. This is modern forensic science saying there was no accelerant found. The Grace Halogen
kerosene, jet fuel in the 50s.
They had it. The ability to test for it, was my thing. I think that the modern forensics being able to test for it would be more accurate than what it was in the 50s, 60s. So the Grace Halogen was the pathologist, say that Mr. Michael Flaherty did have type 2 diabetes and hypertension, which is something, again, we'll talk about when we start talking about the reasons potentially for this. But the really thing that really made us stood out and actually made headlines pretty much around the world was a Dr. Kieran McLaughlin, who was the coroner. He pointed out that without any adequate explanation, he referenced Professor Bernard Knight's book on forensic pathology. He said that this has to be classed as human combustion, spontaneous human combustion. He argued that the fire could not have been caused from the open fireplace 2 feet, right next to his head. He also, for some reason, commented saying that he didn't believe it was divine intervention either. Not quite sure why a coroner was referencing that, but he must have been asked a question. It seems to me that it's odd that he's dismissed the fire, but at the end of the day, this is a professional coroner with a long career of 30 years. Arguing that this body, that when you don't have any other explanation, you have to class it based on this, basically. But he argued that it's just a classification. He wasn't saying what the cause was. It was just the only way he could classify it. So maybe a little bit of a technicality there. But like I said, the interesting thing really for me is that it's with modern science, modern pathology, modern testing and everything else. This was treated like a crime scene initially because they did suspect foul play. Everything else, they could not find any scientific explanation for what happened to Michael Flaherty. I found that fascinating. He was 76 years old, by the way, which is a common thread, I think, for a lot of these cases. Elderly.
Okay, Damo, what have you got for us, brother? Do you want to hit us with your tale of woe?
Well, yeah, why not? I kind of focused on survivors because I thought, it'd be interesting to know what perhaps survivors or even witnesses have got to say about these events. So the case that I was going to discuss first of all is Jack Angel, who was an individual who claimed to be the victim of spontaneous combustion. So on the 12th of November 1974, he was working as a clothing salesman in Savannah, Georgia. He parked in a hotel parking lot. and then in his, with his trailer hooked up, and then went to sleep. He claims to have awoken 4 days later, noticed strange burn marks all over his body in various places. He said his right hand was burnt from the wrist down to his fingertips, so obviously seriously burnt and blistered. And then he also noticed sort of a hole in his chest that almost looked like a big explosion out of his chest. He said he didn't feel any pain really from any of the burns that he appeared to have sustained. So got up, showered, dressed as normal. Nothing in the trailer appeared to be burnt either.
So he had an injury that looked like an explosion out of his chest. So he got up and had a shower.
Yeah, I have to confess, when I heard that too, that was a little bit.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I'd be looking around for an alien.
I would be probably a little bit more worried myself that I had like parts of my body that were there the night before when I went to sleep missing, and that probably would take precedence over a shower. I tend to agree.
There are parts I'd check first, though,
isn't it?
You'd be looking for the xenomorph, surely.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's what I'd be looking for.
Yeah.
And then, like I say, you'd be checking bits, wouldn't you, to make sure nothing's fell off. So it's like, oh my god, oh fuck, that's still there.
Yeah, sorry. Anyway, so after he'd got showered and dressed, he decided to head outside and over to the hotel, where he must have collapsed on the floor, because then he woke up in hospital, now experiencing immense pain from all of the burns. And obviously more burns than I think he'd initially realised. He'd also had some burns up his back. None of the doctors could explain what had happened to him. The burning seemed to have happened in the tissue inside of his hand, and then continued up the inside of his arm. And his hand was so infected, it was amputated relatively quickly, I believe. The trailer was searched by the police, and there were no signs of any fire really, apart from in the position in which he found himself, waking up, like most of these other cases. And then the really interesting thing about this guy was that he ended up trying to take a company to court. So he ended up trying to take the company of the manufacturer of the RV that he'd slept in that night to court, saying that he'd been messing with the water heater because the hot water wasn't working, and he'd scalded himself with hot water. But that was thrown out of court because the burns were not considered to be caused by liquid water and were caused internally and came out, and the court case was thrown out. So it's almost like he was trying to see if he could get away with suing somebody, didn't get away with it, and then
So he had like what you would consider to be a perfectly reasonable explanation. Well, I was messing with that, and then I woke up with burns. And it's more
water
reasonable
scalding you make a hole in your chest explode outwards and burn out from the.
No, but they argue. No, mate.
Guys heard of the old saying, "Where there's a flame, there's a claim."
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just love that the court went.
Sure, it's flame, isn't it?
Your explanation makes. Well, yeah. The court went. Your explanation makes no sense. The burning came from inside you and burned out. So, bugger off. So they're saying no, something really weird happened to you. So your case is thrown out.
The case was thrown out of court. So I just thought it was an interesting one, because one, he's a survivor, supposedly a survivor. If he didn't circulate, or the story of spontaneous human combustion supposedly didn't circulate till after he'd lost the court case. But having gone through an experience like this man claims to have gone through, of waking up 4 days later after spontaneously combusting and losing like part of your chest and your hand and holes in your back, I'd be scratching around for what happened if I couldn't remember. Wouldn't you? So fixing the water heater. Maybe it was that. Maybe I got hot water or steam, and that did it. Or you'd be thinking of anything you could, wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, it's a crazy story.
Yeah.
So he's one survivor, and I do have another one that I'll briefly mention, but I'll wait for it to go back round.
All right, cool. Well, I think that Jay's got another one, so I'll fling another one out there, and then I'll bring you guys back in. Is a Dr. John Irving Bentley, one of the more famous cases of spontaneous human combustion. In fact, in the notes, perhaps one of the most famous cases of spontaneous human combustion. mainly because of the picture of his remains, I would say.
Mm.
He was a 92-year-old retired physician, as implied by the title doctor, one would assume. And it would appear that just after 9 p.m. on the 4th of December in 1966, he would burst into flame in the bathroom of his home. And on the following morning, the 5th of December, a gentleman by the name of Don Gosnell would let himself in. This was a sort of an arrangement he had. He would check up on Dr. Bentley as a neighbour and so on and so forth. So he could read the meters on that particular day. But as soon as he did, he was met by a smell when he made his way into the basement first. And he was met by a strange burning smell. And he commented that there was a blue kind of smoke that was hanging in the air at the time. And he says at his feet in the basement was a pile of ash, a small pile of ash at his feet. So he sort of like thought, well, that's why I'm smelling smoke, and there's a blue smoke hanging in the air because there's a pile of ash on the floor, and thought that was pretty much it. He then went upstairs, which is the room directly above where he initially was, where he found the small pile of ash, which was the bathroom. And when he entered, on the floor was again the lower leg and a foot, again wearing an undamaged slipper of Dr. Bentley. And next to the foot was a huge pile of ash, as well as his walking frame. And furthermore, on the ground, there was a hole in the wooden floorboards, of course, where everything had dropped down into the basement below, which is his initial findings. So this was 1966. When I looked a little bit of a look up into this kind of thing, when we do our research and we have a little bit of a mosey on around us guys up here, I think it won't be outlandish to make a statement that we sort of see patterns in things. And I know when I was doing the research, one of the patterns that stuck out was if you like a large amount of occurrences within the 50s and 60s. There seemed to be a lot of the high-profile ones were in the 50s and 60s. So I just thought I'd throw that out there as an interesting one. So
which
again,
I've got an interesting point on. There's an interesting point on that. In the 50s and 60s, they used a lot of petroleum-based products, didn't they, and a lot of furniture and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
no, absolutely correct. I mean, a lot of people dying from poisoning and things like that in the 1920s and 30s, lead-based paints on the walls and stuff like that. So things like that go around. Jay, have you got another one for us, brother?
Yeah, well, I was asked a question I've seen a lot when I'm reading about this is, if spontaneous human combustion is a real thing, why don't people just burst into flames walking down the street? So I had a bit of a look into it and found one. A John Nolan, 2009, was in North London. He was literally walking down the street following watching a football match. He's not a Manchester United fan, so I think God spited him. I think that's what I think happened. 70 years old again.
I was going to say the reason that you could tell he was not a Manchester United fan is because he was in Manchester, as opposed to Africa.
If this had happened in Manchester, he definitely wouldn't have been a Manchester United fan.
How old's Manchester United?
180 years.
Yeah, something like that.
God waited until then to pick a side. Anyway.
Yeah. He's always picked a side, but this guy really pissed him off. So anyway, this guy was literally just walking down the street and just burst into flames. He's rolling around the floor. Bystanders apparently tried to put him out and couldn't. Eventually, ambulance arrived, and he was dead on arrival at the hospital. He had third-degree burns over 60% of his body. A crazy story. Andrew Walker, though, the coroner later suggested that actually he'd accidentally set himself on fire. He was trying to light a cigarette. It had landed on him and it caught fire. He was 70 years old, so he had limited mobility and an inability to be able to put himself out. And that's what happened. And it's just because of old clothes, the cotton-rich clothes he was wearing, the fire burned quite quickly and killed him quite quickly. Doesn't, for me, quite explain why bystanders weren't able to put him out. The fire was so intense that they weren't able to help him. and he seemed to die quite quickly. But again, he was in his 70s. I think the shock alone would probably do that. But it's a crazy story. That is mental. But it's a crazy story that it's like saying when you see a lot of this about human combustion and say, well, why don't people just burst into flames walking down the street? It seems sometimes they do.
Yeah, very much so.
It's just very rare. How about you, Damien? You've got one more, you know?
Yeah.
Just quickly, just on the off chance, Steve, have you got another one you want to add, or are we good to go with Damo? No, you no audio,
No,
Steve.
your microphone's off.
Okay, Damo, do you want to go while he sorts?
Yeah, I'll jump in while he fixes the sound. The other case study was kind of just a short case study that I found out about another survivor. Couldn't find too much information about it. However, it's I suppose really it's an example of similar to the last one with Jack Angel, partial spontaneous human combustion and a survivor. His name was Frank Baker. He was a decorated Vietnam War veteran. So he had a few different badges for his time served. So a sort of trusting, reliable person. And in 1995, in his home in Vermont, he was getting ready for a fishing trip with his friend, Peter Willey, when suddenly...
Sorry, what? Sorry, what was his name?
His friend's name's Peter Willey. Yeah, so I knew
Okay.
that would make you laugh, you child. Funny.
More than happy to stop the stream while everybody gets the chortles out. I mean, Peter Willey, both names are named after a penis.
Well, I know it's rather unfortunate,
Johnson,
isn't it? But it's not his fault. It's his parents, isn't it? Yeah, but anyway,
Richard Willey, Dick Willey.
Well, I've since I could go through some worse ones, even ones that I've had as no, I can't. That's fine. Right. Anyway, right then. What was I saying? So anyway, they were getting ready for this fishing trip. He was just sat on the sofa, chatting with his friend Peter, when suddenly he set on fire. Obviously startled both of them. Peter obviously tried to help with I think cushions off of the sofa, trying to like put out the flames coming out of the one side of his body, and eventually they did manage to sort of subdue the sort of partial combustion that had started, and then rushed him to the hospital. And he's done an interview about the events of that day with Peter.
Nice.
Mm.
That's pretty cool. Just really
That's
quickly,
crazy.
you guys can hear me now, can't you?
Yes. I was going to say there was no ignition source anywhere near him. Again, the same things. It just combusting out of nowhere, and this was witnessed. The flames on this one were only, I think, more orangey yellow, so they weren't perhaps as hot as some of the flames that people have seen from some of the bodies when they go into the higher frequencies, the blue and the blue and the green sort of end of the spectrum.
Nice picture, that one.
Right, okie dokie. So there's a few cases anyway throughout, notable cases. Some of them old, some of them relatively recent. So obviously an interesting topic. There is another guy. Is this Yugoslavia, Serbia? I want to be politically correct, or as politically correct as it can be, in Serbia, where another guy just burst into flames in the shop doorway, and somebody captured a photo of it. And yes, we got that photo because that's what we like. I'll find it. This is allegedly supposed to be a genuine photo. It won't be difficult for anybody. You don't have to be particularly eagle-eyed either. It won't be massively difficult for people to spot a bit of a common denominator for a possible theory in this particular picture. So I'll whack it up there.
Yeah, I'm not massively convinced by that.
Yeah, that to me just looks like it's a Molotov cocktail he's dealing with, really, isn't it?
It could just be the moment that like a Molotov's hit him and exploded, and you're just not seeing the glass behind the flames.
It just looks fake to me.
It does,
I don't know. It's,
real.
So
He's had a tandoori, that's just a burp.
Yeah, you don't. Who knows what's in that bottle? And if it's from Serbia, if it's from Eastern Europe, then people like to make alcohol with potatoes and various other kind of things. It could be anything. It could be anything at all. Any reason why that's gone on. But apparently, that is supposed to be one. For some reason, I've sort of got Serbia in my head. I believe that may be Serbian. But there you go. You know, any claims to it or claiming any validity to it, just that there it is. That's what we're looking at with that one, I suppose.
Yeah,
That's
it
pretty
is.
cool. I just, excuse me, just want to get in. In 1982, Jean Seffin, who lived in London, she was witnessed by a whole family bursting into flames in her apartment as well. And that's all I've got on that. I thought I'd add it.
Interesting.
Yeah. Crazy stuff.
Okay, so sorry, Damo. Let's rock with some potential facts, if you like, or things that are in common. So I'll go through them and then we'll chat about them. So cases have these things in common. The most notable things being the victims are very often chronic alcoholics. Apparently, they're usually elderly females. Usually, out of the 200 noted cases or 200, claimed cases.
Is it a 50-50 split, or is it like 60-40 between men and women?
No, it's that they usually are elderly females.
Okay, all right. So it's like hugely that demographic within the 200. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
I forget where I read this, but when I read it, I thought this has got to be a wind-up. But you're saying, a particular source was stating that they're always of a certain kind of age group, the elderly females, and they've usually got a degree. I'm not sure how that's relevant, but they've usually got a degree or they've got high levels of education. And it's like, have they just gone off the Dr. John Irving Bentley with that particular one and so on? I don't know, but
or the FBI profiler manual.
Yeah, exactly. The hands and feet usually fall off.
Yep.
The fire has caused very little damage to combustible things in contact with the body. And the combustion of the body has left a residue of greasy and fetid ashes, which are very offensive in odour. And the skulls are normally shrunken to a teacup size, or the size of an orange, something like that. So they seem to have them kind of things
That's
yeah. Well, I'll quickly say something about the skulls. We'll be saying that they said that the skull explodes. Now, one thing about skulls is they are usually found intact. Now, when a body's cremated, a skull will fall apart, but it won't explode. People imagine that because it's full of moisture and brain tissue and stuff, that the pressure will build up to boiling point and it'll pop or explode like a grenade. And that isn't true. But they can fall apart. The skull's got many entry points throughout it for blood vessels and for nerves and things like that. And
it's made up of like 4 different pieces as well, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
That they sort of merge together as we become adults, but there are actual weak points.
And the main ones are the foramen magnum, which is at the point where the spinal column meets the backbone. It exits the skull and meets the backbone. And all of these sort of like entry points for blood vessels and nerves are filled with a soft tissue. I forget the name of it now, but it acts like a gasket. And that burn at just the same rate as any other soft tissue. And as soon as that does, that's when the structural integrity, if you like, due to heat, will mean that the skull will break apart rather than explode. But the skull usually shrunken, which is a bit of a strange one. Other thoughts on that one, guys?
Sounds like Beetlejuice. I always imagine quite a slow burn, and if it's a slow burn, I could maybe imagine maybe that's why it's sort of
But most of these cases aren't slow burns, though, are they? Most of these cases occur really quickly. I mean, there's the one case, isn't there, with where's her name? I had it written down somewhere. There's a lady that they reckoned within 21 minutes had been incinerated and only had her legs left. I don't think it was a case study we've been through. It was a different one. I'll find her name. But that's phenomenal. And when you combine that with the fact that crematoriums run at what 14 to 2000 degrees centigrade, and even then, that still leaves bone fragments that they then grind down into ash to then put in the urn to then give to the family to go scatter the ashes. So realistically, you're going to need like 3000 degrees Fahrenheit to completely destroy bone, and our crematoriums aren't even capable of producing that to do it. So scientifically, it is baffling.
Extremely, yeah.
Well, the thing is, with slow burn, they still do that on the banks of the River Ganges in India and other religious ways. Other cultures have different ways of getting rid of it.
Yeah.
Forget the name of the actual process now. But it's sort of like class D, in your regular like cremation is much hotter than when they're using this timber. It's sort of like anything that's left over from these slow burning pies that they have at the side of the River Ganges. It's like a hard lump of like half burnt like flesh, and which will be mainly the torso area that's left. The extremities will be burnt away. The shrunken veins and arteries within this like large lump, and it's which probably can contain a lot of the internal organs, and it's really difficult to burn with slow cremation.
Well, wood burns about 600 degrees centigrade as a max.
Yeah,
maybe
That's
I think
centigrade.
wood. So I'm trying to think now. I think its ignition point's more like 350 degrees centigrade, so that might be the top end. I think it's about 575 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right. I think that from their 9/11 videos, 600 degrees centigrade I think was the maximum.
Yeah, I think that's jet fuel starts to go.
Oh no, it's a jet fuel that burns at 600 degrees centigrade.
I think that might be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in my
fire burns about 300 degrees centigrade. You're right. It is right.
Saying that approximately 1,292 degrees Fahrenheit calcium phosphates begin to fuse together and change in colour and shape. So they're not entirely reduced to ash. So modern cremation, so what's intense range in between 1,400 to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, vaporizing all organic matter, and some portions of the inorganic bone do survive this process only as chips and refused fragments of calcium phosphate. In modern crematoriums, this remaining material is sifted through a specialized processor and ground into a uniform substance similar to powder, as Damian said, and this powder constitutes the remains of a body and is primarily cremated bone. Couple of facts I don't know if anybody's interested, but we'll throw them out. You're saying that although cremated remains are commonly called ashes, in truth it's actually comprised of pulverized bone fragments. The cremation process destroys all traces of organic carbon-based matter, and all bodily fluids evaporate and escape through the crematorium's exhaust. Since absolutely no organic material remains after cremation, human ashes do not present any sort of health hazard to the living or the environment. The extreme heat of crematoriums, or the cremators, also mean that little to no traces of the cremation casket or container, regardless of the material, will remain to mingle with the loved one's ashes. And there may remain some minor traces of materials that were with the body during cremation, such as implants, fillings, coffin fittings, and so on. But they'll most likely be detected and removed when the ashes have passed through the magnetic field after processing. Two more. The only thing remaining of the human body after cremation is part of the skeletal structure and occasionally small amounts of salts and minerals. And the human skeleton is composed mostly of carbonates and calcium phosphates. Think of that what you will.
Okay.
Interesting.
You've got to remember, the human body's 70% water. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think water burns very well generally.
No.
Generally speaking.
Well, I mean, it goes back to that point I was talking about as well, doesn't it, Dave? About if you're going to need, in order to like some of these cases where bone is literally incinerated, we would need temperatures of 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit plus for extended periods, several hours, maybe even 12 hours. For them to burn in 6 minutes, the kind of energy required to do that is phenomenal. It's almost like the energy on the subatomic level when you split the atom.
Yeah.
That's the kind of level of energy you're talking about to burn these people this quickly.
Yeah, I mean, are we not talking about in a crematorium, a body's burnt at, like, say, nearly 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 hours before it's ground down. Like you say, it's not just a few minutes. It's like 3 hours at a constant 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Just absolutely, for want of better terminology, completely roasted.
And these cases that have the witnesses that have been there when they've set on fire have obviously witnessed the whole event and have an accurate time record. And these time periods are just not long enough to do what the damage that we're seeing with our current understanding of science.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it really, and that's what led me down the survivors route, to be honest, was that I can't understand it scientifically, so I want to see what these survivors that have only had the partial combustion in like one area, and I don't know.
I was like that the ignition source is quite obvious in that photo. She literally fell in the fire.
Well, did she, or was she sat in the seat next to the fire, caught on fire, and then her legs fell that way? Well, I don't know.
At some point, she ended up head first in the fire. But yeah, okay.
And also, like, it doesn't seem that many of these victims sort of notice that they've been set on fire. They're either incapacitated, asleep, unconscious, fail to react. It's almost like, in some of them, they're almost dead
before they catch on fire. Yeah.
Yeah, or they're. But if you think about it, how intense the energy is for the fire that's starting within them, if you have that kind of energy, like it basically, like, what do they reckon, like 100 to maybe 200 degrees, and the human body dies. That's only like 100 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and you'll just die. And then obviously it goes a little bit higher than that, and then all the water evaporates out your body, and then so if you've got something that's burning at 3,000 degrees centigrade internally outwards, that's why I was astounded there were survivors as well.
How does nothing else catch on fire? I know plastic objects nearby and things like that tend to distort and melt a little bit, but it's bizarre. I mean,
especially when you do your fire safety training, they talk about radiation a lot, don't they? And what's the other one where the heat can transfer through objects? But radiation's a big one. Things will just catch fire. Convection.
Yeah.
That's a wooden table. That's material there. I mean, you see this. The body's there within 2 feet. There is an old style chair with that cottony material on, and that's not caught fire.
Yeah,
that seems strange.
Which is pretty flammable, as we just established. 350 degrees is the ignition point, and there's something next to it that's burning at several thousand degrees centigrade, or Fahrenheit. Sorry, not centigrade.
I think if you also look at the photo, you can't ignore the fact if you look where the soot has been deposited upward diagonally to the top right, so you can sort of see the course of the flames, or what the way that the direction in which it burnt. So you can see soot on the wall, but nothing actually appears to be burnt. And you sort of would, with the temperatures that you would assume to be involved, that the material on said chair to the right would show signs of charring.
Yeah.
Or something,
It's almost like the body acts as a containment field.
Very much so.
Going back to vampires.
Aliens.
More sense than the rest of it. Okay.
It is weird. It is strange.
Right, so let's have a little bit of a look into possible. Before even like going into this, I mean, we've already talked about the strange and the bizarre, but before going off too much into the strange and bizarre, or the more outlandish theories as to why it happens or why people think it happens, let's have a little bit of a bat it around a little bit, the so-called possible normal explanations as to why things like this can. I mean, it almost feels absolutely stupid saying that word given what we're discussing, but should we say the more prosaic explanations as to why this kind of thing can and does happen, allegedly? Who wants to take it up first?
I'll go first.
Go on, Steve.
Personally, I think it has something to do with your insides, obviously, or your. I'm not very good with biology or anything like that. So everything that we're made up of, like our cells and things like that, it just I don't know, combusting in some weird, strange way. I mean, the possible causes for it, as we sort of stated before, like static electricity, stress and obesity, alcohol consumption, and also sort of bacteria as well, and also something to do with, is it the acetates? Is that am I saying it correctly?
Acetates.
To do with acetone.
Yeah,
It's a
a bit of inside your body.
organic compound the body produces, isn't it? With it's to do with the metabolism and also ketosis as well, I think, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it has to be something biological that's going on inside. But for it to do what it does to the body and so quickly, and you not even want to try and help yourself for whatever reason, why you can't. It's yeah, it bamboozles me. It really does. It really does. But yeah, I think it's something to do with biology, definitely. Yeah.
Well, so you've got the standard hypothesis, which is the reverse candle effect.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's the
That's the mainstream.
More than anything else, the mainstream theory. Yeah,
The
well,
mainstream
let's
theory,
discuss
yeah.
it, because scientists that know more than us think it's possible. But anyway, so you've got the reverse wick effect. So the clothing on the outside acts like the wick. There's an ignition source, normally a cigarette or something else. That starts to burn. As that burns, then the fat from under the skin starts to come through. That acts as a fuel, and also explains why there's slimy residue everywhere. That's the stuff that didn't burn. And it's a relatively intense but slow burn. That's been tested on sort of, they've done a few experiments with pigs, and we see very similar effects. Then we see to think, there's like one trotter left, sort of thing, and we see this very localized, intense burning. The flames don't get particularly big; it just sort of smolders, but it does take time. It does take a while, but it does get really hot. That seems to make sense to me. The thing that also then adds to that was why we don't see massive cases of human combustion has been because it only really happens with the elderly. If it happened to me, I'd wake up and go, oh, shit, and put myself out. The elderly necessarily can't. There seems to be quite a lot of cases where people are diabetic or type 2 diabetic, which would tend to suggest quite large people or high fat content and whatever.
Yeah, well, that's also, I think, one of the common things, isn't it? Weight. It's quite the average weight. If you looked at the 200 cases, would probably be quite high. So perhaps there is excess fat to burn with some of the people. Maybe, yeah.
But poor health and elderly seems to be also a common denominator.
Poor diet,
hypertension, all these sorts of things. That somebody basically a fire starts and they don't have the ability to help themselves or to prevent the thing. That one of the things is that for it to be spontaneous human combustion is that is supposed to be the cause of death, but there is so much damage a lot of the time. And with the case I spoke about, the Michael Flaherty, the pathologist could not have a cause of death. Just as the body was virtually destroyed, there's nothing to test, to check. Because they can't say, well, there's smoke inhalation, there's smoke in the lungs. There are no lungs. So,
surely you can put fire. You do know it was fire that caused it. That's like your only sort of like word that you can.
Yeah, that's not really a cause of death, though. I mean, not medically speaking.
I know fire brackets SHC question mark.
Technically, we all died from heart attack. But yeah.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Technically,
we all
work
die
after.
from inhaling
shock or
oxygen
something,
and the free radicals slowly destroying every cell in our body, and that's why we age.
That's true.
So by breathing, you're dying. But anyway, that's
Well,
it.
I'm going to stop immediately.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think I'll last longer than 5 minutes though by keeping breathing. So
Rule of 3.
I'm going to keep breathing. The wick effect. I don't know. There have been some experiments with pigs, but but the intensity and the time period seem to differ in the lab with the wick effect with the pigs compared to the real life cases of spontaneous human combustion. And I just don't think what's repeated in the lab is a reflection of the cases in the real world with that, to be honest. There's some great theories though.
I'd say that Mary Reeser, she possibly could have burned for 4 or 5 hours before a landlady decided to phone the police and things like that. Obviously, after that, it was too late. She was, dead and stuff. But yeah,
Dead
she said
and stuff. what other stuff is there? Dead
Yeah, I was going to say.
Dead is kind of final, Steve. You're not doing much stuff after that, brother.
Give it a go, though.
I'm going to start a new channel, Dead and Stuff.
Dead and stuff, yeah.
Next week's episode on Mystery Machine. What the fuck's the stuff?
Oh, I found the name of the victim was the one that was burning for 21 minutes, they reckon, and completely incinerated apart from a leg left. That was Helen Conway. Was the one for that one, with the witnesses obviously getting the help there quickly. What about some other theories? I've got a few that I
just want to throw something into the mix about the wick effect before we move on. Just for anybody in the side chat who really cares, but it was Professor Brian J. Ford is the guy who came up with this, the wick effect theory. It's dependent again on an ignition source, though. There needs to be an ignition source for this to work, such as a lit cigarette could fall onto the victim's clothes if they're asleep or whatever, or they've had a medical crisis, as Jay said. And what he said is pretty much like he's thinking that once there's a heat source, the flames burn through the skin and release fat that acts as a wick and amplifies the burning flame. The flame will continue for as long as there's a source of fat. Because of the prolonged burning, some researchers think that the body's water slowly evaporates. The theory was tested on dead pigs, as Jay said, since their fat composition is similar to humans, aka humans being known as long pigs. The test showed that with a heat source, it would be possible for flames to result. And as the flames burn hotter, the source is destroyed. For example, the cigarette butt, which is why we don't see the cause of why it happened, because the evidence is burnt away. And also, since hands and feet have the least amount of fat, this may explain why they're usually left unburned after an incident.
Good point. I was going to mention that, but forgot.
Go on, Damo, where were you at with it? What did you want to...
I was just going to say, you mentioned it all there, like the common things, isn't it? I suppose that's the best thing to know is the common things are either alcohol, which is obviously, flammable. That seems to be common. Ignition sources, smokers seems to be quite a common trait amongst all of the people or the SHC victims. The remaining feet and hands, perhaps not always the hands, more so the lower legs, isn't it? In the feet that tend to be remaining. Again, that tends to be really, really common because of, like you said, the low fat content probably being why. I'm trying to think of what other similarities there are. Just trying to list them all off. Any others, guys?
Wonder about whether the legs are intact, but the hands aren't in many cases. Because in some cases the people aware of what's going on and try to put it out with the hands, thus igniting them? I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know that as an absolute. I'm just throwing that out there.
The photos you showed, that earlier photo you showed, Dave, that he was in the bathroom. What the hell was the ignition source in the bathroom? I know it was back in the day, and they used to have they used to dry their clothes in the bathroom and things like this. And I'm sure my nan had like a fire thing in the bathroom that they used to dry clothes, but I'm not sure. But what the hell is the ignition source? And the other thing is, in the other images you see, their leather shoes are perfectly intact. They're not dried out. They're not. They still look shiny.
Yeah.
That's
bizarre.
crazy.
That is a good point. That is a very
Follow
good
up.
point. And another
mean,
nice gruesome one. I've only got a couple of pictures, so I won't keep showing them because they're not going
They aren't
down
the
as well as I
nicest
would have liked.
pictures, are they?
No, they're not as popular as I would have thought. This is a more recent one, allegedly.
Oh wow.
Okay, that's yeah. Okay.
See the teeth?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like, you know, when people have got like Halloween costumes from supermarkets and stuff like that, and so excuse me, somebody actually accidentally gets a spark or something on it from a sparkler or whatever.
Shell suits back in the day.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wouldn't they? Just sort of melt onto the body and not actually cause a massive sort of fireball of flame, if that makes sense. I mean, like the clothes back in the even in the 70s and 60s and 50s and stuff like that were quite thick, quite heavy material.
And even so, you've got a question about that. How many people in the side? How many people in the side chat or how many people here on the panel have smoked or do smoke and have dropped a cigarette and they haven't?
I was going to say that
instantly ignited, have they?
Yeah,
Well, no.
I've fallen asleep and woken up in the morning with a half burnt cigarette, and ash all over the bed.
Yeah, but that's probably rolling
2
tobacco,
times.
not a straight cigarette as such. Because if it's a pre-rolled or manufactured cigarette,
Yeah,
they contain a lot more chemicals as accelerants, don't they, to keep them burning? And
If
they
you're
do
one
tend
of
to
those-
burn holes.
One of those commoners what can only afford rolling tobacco, you deserve to die.
No, you're safer. Rolling tobacco
Common
will
law.
go out.
Yeah.
Rolling
It doesn't-
tobacco won't even burn a hole in your clothes. That's
Okay,
how
well then
easily that will go out.
if you're that
Hot
posh that you can buy tailor-made cigarettes, then the same thing
That's it.
applies. Reverse it, you know.
Yeah,
What
that's
is
it.
it?
Just
12
reverse
quid
it.
for a packet of cigarettes? Good
Something
God.
like that, 15, I don't know. But yeah, but that's I was going to say, right? So but I've dozed off perhaps like in a room with a pre-done cigarette before, and like leant on your hand, and I've woke straight up because I've burnt myself.
Yeah.
It hurts, right? I don't think somebody
burnt
can
myself
sit
just
there
before.
for like 4 to 5 hours while their body fat slowly drips out into their clothing to keep a fire burning without knowing they're burning.
But isn't that the point that this only seems to happen to the elderly and the medically unfit?
Well, the majority of the victims are that. However, there are some that are teetotal, never drank, never smoked, and they've still experienced the same.
Yeah, and some of the earlier ones have been young people. That Mr. Crook, okay, he is a character in Bleak House, I know. But he was just going about his business and pretty much enveloped in flames. It wasn't like he wasn't compos mentis. He wasn't able to walk around or get about, or that he was disabled in any way. The Polish night guy, and some of the others are still able to be completely ambulatory, completely fine. And was it Mary Reeser? She was a little bit infirm, wasn't she? And Dr. Bentley, but it does seem that quite a few of them. Pardon?
Did she have the brace, Steve? Was Mary Reeser the one that had the disabled and had a brace on her leg because she'd done her ankle in?
Dr. Bentley.
Oh, was that Dr. Bentley? Sorry, I'm getting confused.
Bentley,
I think that Countess Cornelia was fairly young as well, I think.
Yeah, well, she was still walking around the house and completely fine. She couldn't move. It's not like she was completely confined of anything. Because you sort of would, and again, this is maybe naivety, I don't know, but you would sort of assume that for somebody to burst into flames and then not be able to do anything about it whatsoever. And I'm not saying that that's what Jay's trying to imply or infer. It's just that the situation and the demographics almost do that on his behalf anyway. But you would sort of like to think that if they are able to move, if they are not completely disabled or they're not too ill or too sick or too old, that they would be able to do something about it if they suddenly burst into flames.
Yeah.
So is there another part or another mechanic in play that we don't know about? That means they can't do anything about it.
And there's always so much damage to the body scientifically, you're not going to be able to know of that X factor unknown element necessarily is.
Yeah.
Because it may have physically have burned away. Makes
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
It'd be very difficult to prove whatever, or even have a guess of whatever that might be. If it's
Yeah.
gone.
I think there's probably more theory
know.
to the acetone sort of theory though than there is to the wick effect. I mean, the acetone theory is that organic compound that Steve mentioned that's produced in the body in metabolic system and ketosis. Now, interestingly, people with higher levels of alcohol consumption and also diet can affect the amount of acetone your body produces, and higher levels of alcohol and a poor diet tends to produce higher levels of acetone. Acetone, when it's been experimented on in the laboratory, does burn at an incredibly hot temperature with a blue flame. And there's some interesting results about the scientific experiments around the acetones that the body produces. So it could be related to that, potentially. I do like that theory.
Maybe in concert with some sort of wick effect.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Possibly, yeah.
Maybe it's an incredibly rare situation where the acetone levels are really high and you're kind of wrapped in clothing that's kind of tight and thick and creates that wick. But I just don't see how you wouldn't wake up from burning, like, unless there's no pain. Unless there is no pain. But if there's no pain,
I can remember this is incredibly rare as well. I mean, we are talking 200 cases or something. It is rare.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
And the other thing is, I suppose, we don't know that person's woken up and literally just had a heart attack and then just lied there or had a stroke and then for whatever reason haven't been able to physically put the flame out, just through stress of waking up and finding yourself on fire. So I think there might be a few factors here. That's what I'm trying to say. There might be a few factors that's why it's so rare.
Okay.
It's because these things that happen, but they have to happen sort of together, maybe. But we're completely speculating on that because we've got to go back to the point again. The evidence is burned away.
Yeah.
So we are speculating.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I was trying to make before.
And also, there's only about a dozen of these cases that ever really been like properly investigated from a point of view of mystery. Like I said, the case I spoke about with Mr. Faherty, the coroner put it down to spontaneous human combustion because he had no adequate explanation. Again, the evidence is gone on one part, but also there was just no evidence explanation. That's all he could put.
Yeah.
It wasn't that he believes the human body can spontaneously combusted, but he didn't have another explanation. No. So
yeah. Isn't science the human exploration of the universe through hypothesis and experimentation to understand everything? Absolutely. So what's not explainable by science today will be explainable by science tomorrow. We just don't have the scientific understanding perhaps at the moment. That's where I think that the truth in this probably lies. The thing that I mentioned before, the subatomic process, perhaps that releases that kind of energy, like splitting of the atom, the hydrogen bomb, the atomic bomb, and the energy that releases. Maybe there's some kind of imbalance in the electrical current flowing in that person's body, imbalance in their chi, their energy center, which is a lot of Eastern cultures, believed in for a long time, the chakra points. Or maybe it is some kind of subatomic sort of chain reaction that starts, because of some influence from some kind of subatomic particles from space, because we happen to be going through a different part of the space-time continuum at the moment, and that's there's so many, like, there's my mind's been working on this a lot as to where, and I think the answer is probably going to lie in that and the high levels of energy that are required to burn these bodies this intensely, this quickly, than it is any of these other theories, to be honest, because I don't think any of them, maybe acetone could account for the high temperature but not really, even though it does burn blue, it's still not hot enough. And then there's other theories, isn't there? Static electricity maybe having an effect. I don't know about that. Maybe. Yeah. Again, it's related to our electrical charge that we do have, or all organic animals have. We probably, I think, do have some kind of like aura or field that we generate, and that's how you have that sixth sense, when you know someone's watching you.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just something with how these things we don't yet understand interact, and just being in like the wrong place at the wrong time. The two survivors that I mentioned, both of these two, well, not the first one, he woke up 4 days later, didn't he, supposedly, but the second survivor that I mentioned, his name Frank Baker, wasn't it? He was awake when he caught fire, which allowed him to react and move position. Maybe that had some effect on why then the fire then was able to be put out.
Yeah,
because he wasn't stationary and in that exact like local point of the space-time continuum where some kind of fluctuation in the in space-time was going. I don't know. My mind's been going 6 to the dozen on what this could be.
I just want to.
Steve.
Cheers. The case that I mentioned earlier, 1982, with Jean Seffin or Jeannie Seffin, I've just looked into it a little bit, and so she was sat in the kitchen with her family, and a son or a husband or whoever it was sort of turned around for a minute, turned back, and she was on fire. Basically, she was 61 as well at the time, and they managed to put the fire out. Right, called the ambulance. The ambulance took her to hospital, and she was transferred from I can't think what hospital it was now. From North Middlesex to Mount Vernon Hospital. Her death was caused by broncho pneumonia due to the burns 8 days after the original fire and injury. The relatives suggested at the inquest that the death could have been caused by spontaneous human combustion, but the coroner, the Dr. John Burton, said that there was no such thing and gave an open verdict.
It's a cop out.
Yeah. It's,
I don't know. Verdict.
I don't know, but I don't want to ruin my career.
bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a dick.
They've put another one out about a guy called Young. This is an unfortunate name given what happened to this gentleman.
Oh, no.
Called Young Sick Kim.
I thought it was going to be Young Burned to fucking death.
Yeah, that would be a little bit more apt, I suppose. But,
Lucky Kim.
so this is in 1956.
Sudan Burn.
Sudan Burn.
Sorry.
December 1956, 78-year-old Young Sick Kim sat in his wheelchair reading his newspaper. Gather round, kids. His paralysis meant he spent much of his life in that position, but he still lived as full a life as one could in them circumstances. And on this particular afternoon, something strange happened. A bit of an understatement. From out of nowhere, flames began to emerge from his torso area. They were strange in nature, as if they had a kind of intelligence, moving in all directions and spreading out over his body within a matter of seconds. And when his neighbour, Virginia Cadet, rushed over to see what the shouts and screams were, she was shocked to see that Sick Kim had blue flames covering his entire body. And after she snapped back to her senses, she ran to get help, and she would return 15 minutes later, where a neighbour had been now only pile of ashes and 2 bizarrely unburned feet. So his feet remained. As we've seen, this seems to be a little bit of a thing. Much like many other cases, no other part of the room was affected or even damaged by what is apparently a very intense blaze, or you would imagine to be an intense blaze, despite the flammable nature of much of the room. In fact, when further analysis of the scene went ahead, investigators simply couldn't account for why the piles of clothes, books, and other flammable items all around where Sick Kim met his unfortunate end had simply not gone up in flames, as the laws of science suggest that they should.
Through convection or radiation alone.
Yeah. I mean, we've all seen the fire service videos, haven't we? Or adverts on TV of, don't leave a cigarette lying about because this is how quick a fire can engulf and things like that. You would think that especially back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, we didn't have the health and safety in using non-flammable material in things. So you would think that it would just go up like a flipping atomic bomb. It's bizarre. What intrigues me is how nothing else catches on fire. And especially having to burn at those temperatures, unless. But then again, people have. I was going to say, unless it starts inside and you're actually on fire inside. But then we've seen we have eyewitness reports of people actually seeing people ignite, unless it can happen in different ways, perhaps. You know, we don't know.
Going back around to the vampires thing, like Blade, we seem to keep coming back to it. I don't think we should just dismiss it that quickly.
Yeah, don't just say no. Don't say no.
No, don't.
So it's not like ran through a couple of, try to be prosaic or give what you would consider reasonable explanations or possibilities. But there are outrageous, wackadoodle, completely out there explanations that people give for cases of spontaneous human combustion. Some of the more alternative theories, shall we say. So who wants to take the lead on this? Have you not got a good one like you mentioned just before we came live here, Jay? Do you want to start us off with that?
I have found an interesting one. There's a study done by Sebastian Thielke. Sebastian. It was part of his dissertation when he was at university, basically. And as part of his dissertation, he decided to look into spontaneous human combustion. And his research took him all over the shop. Now, I only found this earlier, literally before the thing, so I haven't had a chance to verify bits and bobs. But we'll go through what he said, basically. So he spoke a lot about this thing called Kundalini, which is a Hinduism tapping into dormant energies within the body. And some people have said that basically this energy, if you can tap into it, could increase the human and potentially be a cause for the human combustion. It's kind of like if you tap into that energy badly, if that makes sense, and you don't have balance. This Kundalini is based on the same thing with like the 7 chakras that we talk about in spiritualism. So he was talking about
that's it. Kundalini yoga. That's where I've heard
Kundalini
it.
yoga.
Yoga.
Exactly.
That's where I've heard it. Yeah.
That's quite a California thing, apparently.
But it is all about these 7 points in your body, the energy points, and they're the same as the chakra points, aren't they?
They're the same as the chakra points. This is based on a lot of raw feminine energy, apparently, is also another aspect. Because it's not like a lot of these faiths. Depending on which faith you look at, they have the same name, but it's slightly different. So in Hinduism, it's a raw female energy, or the female side of the balance of energy. So he talked about that there was experiments in Nazi Germany and in Japan in the early 40s. He couldn't actually figure out what exactly the experiments were regarding, but under Operation Paperclip, some of those German scientists found themselves in America, and they apparently continued those experiments at Alpena, Michigan, at their National Air Force National Guard base. Ghosts? What was that?
Cataclysmic collapse of things over on the side of the room there. Yeah, something's just come off the. Something just flew off.
Well, he found.
Shelf.
What was it?
A lot.
Sorry, it was a DVDs just flew off the shelf.
Oh.
Oh, I was joking. I said ghosts.
No, I wasn't joking and being serious.
You got a ghost with you, yeah.
That was an almighty FUD though as well.
As a spirit. He's unhappy with what we're talking about. But anyway, going back to these experiments. So he found a few videos. The one of is like this burning mouse video, and it's apparently you can find this on YouTube. But I actually think with censorship on YouTube nowadays, it's probably gone. But there's story about the the ghost is gone. I hope it comes back.
I'm just checking something out.
I'll tell a story, and then Dave can come back. So they did this burning flex experiment, and then he's found a bunch of images with scientists basically dissecting burnt pigs, except black and white images from the 60s. Apparently, they were researching something called Safagio frequencies of sound, and they wanted to weaponize it. There's images of helmets with these spiky things on and all this sort of thing. Apparently, they were looking into it for defense purposes, and to see whether they could use this to cause spontaneous human combustion.
So high
within
energy,
enemies.
concentrated high energy weapons, basically.
Concentrate high energy weapons.
They
Guess what
exist
happened in
Did they exist
1960?
in the Middle Ages?
No, we're talking about the 60s, mate. Remember?
Oh, but I thought there were cases going back to the 1400s.
Oh no, yeah, no, there's some of that. But then they're talking about this. These Savatio frequencies actually happen in nature. They were trying to weaponize it. So these are quite natural effects. The helmet was designed to place these sound waves straight into the Ana chakra, which is the brain 7th chakra.
Okay.
Guess what happened to the Air National Guard base in 1964, where they were doing these experiments?
It blew up.
Burned to the freaking ground. And that was the one thing I was able to confirm. This place did burn to the ground. And there is no explanation for what happened.
I'm going to say there's a reason.
So, it seemed to me that this was an interesting case. I mean, I Googled spontaneous human combustion and spirituality, and this document came up. So, it's interesting that potentially the sound waves happen in nature. They're quite rare. They have to do at a certain vibrational frequency to affect what Hinduism's called chakra, but I would more like to call like the general human energy. And again, they were made of matter that vibrates. We all know what happens to some matter when it gets affected by certain sound waves.
Yes, resonant frequencies. You can shatter glass. Frequencies.
Okay, we'll do a lot more than that. We've also seen bridges that collapse when the wind hits a certain vibration, and sound waves that can burn through steel and all sorts of things.
It's always just when it matches the resonant frequency and it causes the most amplitude. So basically can cause the most movement in a bridge or the most, and that's what causes stuff to break.
Yeah, likewise when it's out of phase as well, when it's at the peaks and troughs don't match, when it's out of phase as well.
And it would seem that is what the military were looking into when they were doing these experiments, and we don't have the country. And very, very rarely it can happen perfectly naturally. And then I suppose you then include somebody that's maybe, like you said, infirmed or something else, can't move or can't, do something to help themselves. And very occasionally just can happen as somebody's walking down the street, like we talked about earlier as well.
It reminded me of the brown noise or the brown frequency. It's a frequency of sound that you can make you shit yourself, doesn't it?
Yeah. That can cause nosebleeds.
So there's one that sets us on fire as well.
Potentially. And they're using microwave weapons to as crowd control. That's quite high energy weapons that do create that basically give you a bad sunburn, but it actually creates a burning sensation up to an inch deep into the skin.
The possible reasons that they were trying that out in the 90s at Waco as well.
Yes, potentially. Yeah. But the thing that I come down to with this was, if anybody, particularly in the early 60s during the Cold War, if anybody said to the Americans, we might be able to set people on fire at a distance, the Americans would go, yeah, okay, much do you want?
Yeah,
let's have a go at that.
Right, I'm going to jump in there. I'm going to jump in there before we start any kind of culture bashing. That can be said of anybody, okay?
Oh,
right, that can be said of anybody. If that kind of thing was offered to the Russians, they take it. The Chinese. Oh, yeah. So before bashing any particular culture, I just want to put that out there, okay? Because I've noticed a trend when it comes to the Americans. I'm not having any of that.
Because it's based on evidence. The Americans, particularly in early Cold War, due to Cold War paranoia and communism paranoia, funded loads of these insane projects. The Russians did as well, but the Americans funded a crap load.
Yeah, I'm not even getting into a debate about that, but go on.
Well, it's just fact. So, but yeah. So I'm just one of the things that if this project, I can completely believe this project would exist. Is my point, because it was a potential weapon, and like you said, the Russians would have just as easily put money into it or resources into it as well. But those were the two main superpowers at the time, and we're in direct cold conflict. So we had no money in the 60s. We wouldn't have done it because we were skint.
No, we'd have probably just our friend across the pond, I guess, and tagged along with the Americans' endeavours in that, I imagine. Maybe we did do it ourselves. I wouldn't put it past us either, to be honest.
Like Dave said,
where technology is concerned, the country who's got the best technology wins a war. So all the big countries are trying to develop the best technology to win the next war. and keep it secret from all the other countries. And that's just how it's been for a long time, and how it will be for a long
Forever,
time.
pretty much. From when
Yep.
the first longbow was invented. Ever
Yeah,
since.
probably.
Yeah, anyway,
I did have
it's an interesting case.
I had an
So,
interesting point.
other alternate theories to why going on. Have you got any, Steve, that you want to throw out there? Alternate things that you might have picked up on or read about?
Well, who was it? With the case of I've forgotten the flipping name. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Mary Risa, flipping heck. Only been talking about it all night. The detective, he received a letter saying that it was ball lightning because the person who wrote and sent the letter had seen it happen before. So yeah,
200 cases ever, and you've seen it twice. Pull the other one.
Yeah, bizarre.
I thought about
Sorry.
ball lightning earlier, though. I actually did think about ball lightning. Because a lot of the time, these are open by open fireplaces. Could it literally be something like a plasma thing coming? I don't know. But
could be.
Ball lightning's interesting, though. As a theory, we don't know what. I can't explain it, can we? Scientifically,
happening
what ball lightning is
indoors
even.
might be a stretch.
Could be. It would be interesting.
John Abrahamson is the fellow you're referring to there, Steve. The ball lightning theory was John Abrahamson, yeah. Nice.
I wonder if like with the static electricity, or if there was any electrical faults or anything like that in. Oh yeah, but then no, of course not.
Do you want to include us in your little internal monologue there, Steve? Having to guess at what you're talking about.
Say what you're thinking.
Sorry, guys. Yeah. Well, no. I was thinking. Well, maybe it has something to do with there could be loose wiring or something, or electromagnetic fields or something like that around the homes of these people where they've combusted. But then I was thinking, well, no, because you've got the people that have been walking down the street and just gone up and things like that. So that could possibly put that idea to bed. But no, it has to be something that your body does. I don't believe it's going to be cigarettes or anything like that. It has to be what's going on inside you, a combination of different things all going on at once. We know that a lot of them are obese, if you like, poor diets, diabetic, a mixture of all that together in a certain way or form. I don't know.
And it just messes with the electrical charge that runs around the human body, and there's some kind of short which creates some kind of chain reaction, which then a chemical chain reaction, which then creates that intense heat burning from the inside. I do see that as plausible. It's kind of similar to what I was saying about the subatomic level, but maybe not needing quite the subatomic level and the power of splitting the atom. You're just having some kind of chemical chain reaction that's occurring from an acetone buildup in the body due to poor diet, overweight, obese, all those factors that we mentioned that are common occurrences, and then perhaps the ignition source being cigarettes.
The body's full of bacteria and acids and all sorts of these things. Could this be some sort of combustion, like a chemical combustion internally? Like you said about maybe the fire starts internally. Is this something that could literally, start in the gut? Or does calcium burn well?
You can get runaway endothermic or exothermic reactions, can't you? Where in chemistry. So yes, it is possible that you could just be creating within your body a certain amount of different types of chemicals that react together to cause a runaway. I can't remember which way around it is. Exo's up, isn't it? Endo's down. So a runaway exothermic reaction. Yeah, that's definitely plausible. Yeah.
Could it be possible that you could have a bacteria that could set itself alight, if that makes sense?
If it reacted with something else, maybe.
Not really.
It could on
not
its
bacteria.
own,
No.
But I mean, I wonder if the bacteria could do. Because obviously the bacteria then creates chemical reactions, doesn't it? I'm just wondering. I mean, because we've got acids in the stomach that are pretty.
I suppose you've got enzymes, haven't you, that are catalysts, which can be I don't know. Maybe it's not out of the realm. I don't know. My biology is not as good as my other sciences, to be honest. I'm just trying to trying to think, but maybe.
Does
it's
anybody
it's
know
plausible.
how much water or fluids the body actually holds?
About 70%, depending on your health.
Like, I mean,
70% of
liters.
your body weight, basically.
It doesn't work like that, Steve, because people are different sizes.
Of course, yeah.
So
it's only it's only a very rough
like
estimate, isn't it?
70 kilos?
Wow.
No, not even that. Yeah, probably 70 kilos. So I'm about about, what would I be? About 21
left butt
kilos
cheek weighs more than
of everything else and 49 kilos of water.
We are a lot of water.
Yep.
What happened?
For me,
go on, sorry.
So for me, Steve, 49 kilos, roughly. Just do the same with your weight, you'll know.
Well, I don't know too much about this particular geezer, I'll be honest, but I've got him down as a UK writer. So a writer from the UK, Michael Harrison, has suggested that spontaneous human combustion is connected to poltergeist activity because, he argues, the force which activates the poltergeist originates in and is supplied by a human being. That's not true. Potentially. And within the concluding summary, Harrison writes, spontaneous human combustion, fatal or non-fatal, belongs to the extensive range of poltergeist phenomena. So he's blaming poltergeist for it.
Well, it's an energy. So whatever you describe the energy as, it's another factor that could. I'm just not something I personally am that keen on or think or believe.
His favourite film is probably that film from the 90s with Swayze. Anyway,
but is it? Could it be some sort of energy that could potentially cause some sort of spark? I don't know.
Well, everything's got an ignition point, right? You don't need an ignition source if you heat something enough. If you heat something enough, it will just set alight. If you heat a piece of wood without a flame to 350 degrees, it will ignite. If you heat a human body to, probably 760 degrees Celsius, about 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, I think it will just ignite. You don't need an ignition source if there's enough heat. So if there's a runaway exothermic reaction, or there's some kind of like I said, subatomic process maybe, that's creating that real huge amount of energy that's required to cause the burning in these short time periods, then that would explain it quite well in my mind. One thing I did want to come back to, Jamie, was you mentioned the chakra points and the and that like the Shaolin monks, for example. So they can regulate their body heat really well, can't they? So like they can they can sit there in like the middle of like winter in minus 20 or whatever in a wet towel and regulate their body heat. So they're actually regulating their internal temperature up, so they actually can steam off the wet towel in like minus conditions, etc. And then you've got that Scandinavian guy that climbed Everest in his shorts, no t-shirt.
I'm googling that. What?
Wim Hof.
What?
Yeah, that's it. Wim Hof. I forgot his name. Right.
And that's
so what I'm saying is the human
somebody
mind,
actually watched him go.
Yeah. The human mind and the human mind and the regulation of body temperature with the human mind is incredible. I could even go to the extent that Shaolin monks could probably set themselves on fire from increasing their own internal body temperature. And I think there may have been an instance where one Shaolin monk did do this in protest at some point.
Yeah, was that the guy in the street?
Oh
yeah, that was it. Yeah.
There was one that used an accelerant, but I don't know. I'd have to double check, but I think I've read a story about that, about the Shaolin monks before.
So what do you think that when this it's done by accident, I assume, then by these elderly people a lot of the time that it happens to? Do you think that, what he's trying to say is that the Shaolin monks show that this is physically possible, and maybe somebody's unwell, elderly, whatever, that is almost like happens by accident?
Yeah, a specific set of like extreme circumstances are met in terms of like, diet, everything combining that then creates this runaway chain reaction in their body that they can no longer control, perhaps with their internal core system. Maybe. Homeostasis breaks down for some reason, and the body goes into something the Shaolin monks can do through concentration and focus, meditation.
The body can actually do on its own if something breaks down. The
Yeah,
body
just certain
spends a lot
conditions
of time
along.
balancing its temperature, doesn't it? I mean, we have the homeostasis system in the that does a lot of time regulating our temperature, and I could imagine that. I don't know if then the body can accelerate to a few thousand degrees, but
I'm just saying it's plausible if you can regulate your internal body temperature, great amounts. Who knows perhaps with training or the specific set of circumstances, like we said, maybe it occurs and that runaway,
effect. Fascinating. Maybe.
Strange but true.
Yeah, I think it's normal. Like fatality occurs at a certain temperature, though, doesn't it? That's why fevers and things like that can make us delirious and so on and so forth. I mean, I would argue that how did they get to that sort of internal body temperature before any kind of control mechanism starts to break down? Anyway, regardless of state of mind, just the actual physiological symptoms that they start to experience will exceed. I mean, in saying that, what was he called? Hang Nyuk Thun or something like that, was it? Who set himself on fire in protest of the Vietnam War, and he sat through it, didn't he? Is he burned? So maybe not. I don't know. It's strange.
Yeah.
I've got the image of it burning now. Now, like, that was an awful.
In the middle of the thing, wasn't it? Oh God.
Yeah, that was just way to get people's attention to a cause for sure. I'm not recommending it to anybody, by the way. So don't.
It's a very selfless act.
You make sure you tell people why you're doing it beforehand, or like, why do you do that? I don't know. Good, wasn't it? Some guy tried to do it. Did he not? Sorry?
Did he not?
No, I think he did. I was being sarcastic. I was just saying, you need to make
That's
sure
a nice change, Jamie.
Can't help it. A guy actually tried to do that in my workplace once. I worked at the council at the time, and he was mentally unwell, but he was he had massive debt with the council, so he turned up in our offices, stood out from the garden, doused himself in petrol, and set light to himself.
No,
but he survived.
Wow,
he didn't do a very good job.
This is another thing. So there's people that deliberately cover themselves in accelerant, set themselves on fire, and survive.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I think
these people aren't
staff were basically
surviving,
facing it with a fire extinguisher. They pretty much doused him in fire extinguishers immediately.
Okay,
obviously been stood there shouting and threatening to do it for ages. Then when he did go up, and they pretty much straight away. But he did survive.
Quick reactions from you and your work colleagues there.
Yeah.
I think that's a claim to fame that many people can turn around and say that they themselves have got. I mean, not many people might want to experience it, but that is. So how long did the entire episode take then? Really, from him trying to immolate himself, and then people.
It was about 30 minutes. I watched him through a window as he was on screen. Like I said, the police turned up and things, and but the fire brigade hadn't turned up yet by the time that this happened, and then as the police sort of got more aggressive, he let himself fire. But it was about 20 to 30 minutes. It all went on from the initial shouting and dousing himself in the petrol sort of thing. Yeah.
Oh, I can't think of a worse way to go. It's one of the worst ways to die, isn't it? Drowning or in a fire. But even drowning, at least it's only 5 to 7 minutes probably before you suffocate. With a fire, depending on how quickly or badly you're burning, you could be burning for half an hour. Oh,
burned at the stake takes a long time to die, doesn't it? And even then, it's the smoke inhalation that tends to kill you. Yeah. But you, I mean, the pain must be insane. I mean, you know how much it hurts to burn your little finger.
Burn yourself, that's it.
With your nerve endings still firing, I can't imagine much more painful than being burnt to the stake. Or if you burn in a house fire, generally speaking, you don't burn to death, you suffocate. But something burns at the stake or something like that. But I think drowning terrifies me as well because you know it was happening, and I think that's a bit scary. I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is knowing it's happening. But fire, you got pain thrown in as well. No, thank you.
I think there'd be that moment of euphoria though when you do take that breath of water after the fight for the 5 to 7 minutes, and you just.
I reckon your brain starts dying anyway, don't you? And you do actually, when you suffocate, you do actually go into a state of euphoria just before you die.
People who've had near-death experiences talk a lot about hitting that euphoric state, don't they? That's why Jim Jeffries, when he's on the comedian, when he's on about that friend of his who's he grew up with, and he was a disabled friend of his. Yeah, I forget what he had now. Is it multiple MS?
I think it's multiple sclerosis. Yeah.
Sclerosis, yeah, multiple sclerosis. And he was on about how he's actually died 9 times, and he's asked him what happens when you die, and he goes, "Nothing. It's black." Do you know why I trust him? Because he's died 9 times, and I just think he's probably right.
I'll go with that.
Yeah.
Have we got any more?
Bit of a tangent.
Any more
Right,
theories?
So, any more theories out there? Did we write any more down? Some of them just
Aliens.
absolutely wacko-doodle.
Methane gas
No, there's
produced
gotta
by
be
the
an
body.
aliens.
Methane
No,
gas, but that kind of
Steve.
ties into the chemistry that we were discussing earlier, and not really anything different. Might link into runaway effect that we mentioned.
Yeah, very possibly.
If they farted to death.
Get our runner banner at the bottom for the people in the side chat. Feel free to ask us any questions. And before we round it up by saying what we think and stuff like that, if you want to, I know that there's been statements and stuff in the side chat, but I will not stop what I'm doing to answer them until the end. That's just the way I roll. The opportunity for the questions is now.
I just think, could Ghost Rider be classed as a spontaneous combustion case?
Yeah,
I guess
certainly.
Ghost Rider is. Or the Torch, is it, from Fantastic Four? Yeah, they're both good examples of. Unfortunately for them, though, they're all right. They don't burn.
Yeah.
I suppose one's undead and one's DNA's been genetically modified.
Yeah, one's a demon.
By the alien planet. Ghost Rider's a
Secret
demon,
fire eaters. They could be. 76-year-old fire eaters.
Yeah. That's a thing.
You've got to watch for those octogenarian circus acts. That's what you've got to be careful of. The bearded lady, the 95-year-old fire eater.
Fire eaters never retire. They just grow old.
My
They never
stepbrother
retire.
was a fire eater.
What about a star going supernova? What, inside somebody? No.
What did you just say, Steve? You're what? So what? Sorry.
My stepbrother used to do fire eating and stuff like that.
I don't want to see a bloke do it. It's kind of sexy when a woman does it. But a bloke, I don't want to watch that.
I agree with that sentiment.
Yeah.
100% as it happens. Yeah, there's just something about it, isn't there? I suppose. Like, what would you call it? What's the Latin word for fire?
When a star goes supernova, I suppose it technically implodes first, doesn't it? Then it explodes. But the energy levels of a star going supernova are far beyond the energy required to incinerate someone. The surface of the sun's like 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, probably about 5,500 degrees Celsius, and then it probably goes. The centre's probably about 27 million degrees.
The internal's actually cooler than the surface, but
I don't know.
the corona's the hotter part of the star.
There's also a layer of calcium inside, just underneath the surface, 6 miles deep. That prevents too much getting out, apparently, as well.
I'm pretty sure the centre, under the significant pressure from the mass above it, will be at much higher temperatures than the surface.
Google it.
Yeah.
Google
it.
I did
I don't know
before we
about
started. So the surface is about 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and then in the centre it's 270 million.
I was going to say, I don't know about the core, actually, but I know the corona is hotter than the surface.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, no, that, okay, yeah, okay. So, yeah.
But yeah, a supernova is basically the battle between gravity and energy. Suddenly, as the fuel burns, that's constantly fighting against gravity. And then as the energy burns, then gravity wins and causes a collapse. But then that causes a massive increase in energy, so you get a sudden... Then gravity loses and boom.
Implosion, explosion, isn't it? Yeah. And then it fires a load of particles and gas into a big gas cloud to start a stellar
We're all made out of
nursery
stardust, guys. You're all made out of stardust.
Isn't that mad that the stuff in you was in a star several billion years ago in the centre at 27 million degrees Fahrenheit?
Yeah.
And it's now here today, thinking about where it came from. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I think you're referring to. I'll put it back up briefly, actually, for you, Scott, because I think this is the one that you're referring to. Good question.
I've just got to run to the loo quickly. I'm sorry, guys.
Don't combust while you're gone.
I'll try not to.
That's the
Um,
legs, isn't it, that are left again? The arms are gone, like he
Yeah.
says. But the torso is char grilled, and the head, is that the teeth?
yeah.
It looks like the head seems to be more intact than this one. It looks like it's still got some kind of sort of flesh, skin to the part of the head, a bit maybe. I don't know.
If that's a
It's hard to
genuine
tell.
image, if it is genuine, because you always have to ask that nowadays, unfortunately, he is right. The arms have completely turned to ash.
Mhm.
The body actually looks less burned than the head. The head
Yeah.
looks almost like it's very blackened, but the body and the torso just looks char grilled. It just looks like it's been barbecued.
Yeah, the chest, it seems to be like the chest, throat area, arms, and then, like you say, as it goes down towards the groin, the legs are okay, and then as it goes further up the head, it looks okay. Well, it's not okay,
Not
he's
okay.
dead, but
He's not had a good day. We'll put it
he's
that
not
way.
had a great day, no, but that is a strange photo, yeah.
If the arms aren't like underneath him, but it looks like that the arms have been disintegrated, the arms are gone. It looks like, which makes no sense at all. But I suppose the arms could still be there. They're just sort of semi behind him, maybe. I don't know, but it doesn't look like
You're
that.
right. It's very difficult to make out any kind of structure or outline of or edge of the arm compared to the surface. It's almost like it's merged into one. The victim's arms and the surface that it's they're on. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
There isn't an explanation. I don't have an explanation for that.
Shy ghost. Is it a case of an
It's a bit
alcoholic
of a-
having a wet fart on a lit candle? That's it. We solved it.
I'll put that one up, Shazzy. If you think you're asking, so do we know why people spark? Is that what you're trying to say? I think it is.
Yeah. So where does this? Where does the ignition? What is the ignition? What is the spark that triggers this? Do you think?
An imbalance.
That's the ultimate question, Shazzy. That really is the ultimate question in this, because in most cases there doesn't seem to be one. For a while they blamed it on alcoholics and people that smoked, but there have been a fair few cases where neither has been true, yet people have still spontaneously combusted. So I suppose that would be the golden question, really.
There does seem to be a lot of cases where there is some sort of open fire, and you do get embers and things like that. And there's a lot of the ones you see, they say, well, there's no ignition source, and you look at the photo and go, well, there's one of those corgi bloody three. Those things used to be really popular. You still see them in caravans now, and they're the fires. And you think, well, that's
the 3-bar fires.
Freaking deadly. Calagas jobbies, and it's right at the woman's feet. So it's like, I mean, in a lot of cases there are ignition sources, but like you said, there's that one where he's a pile of ash and he's in the bathroom. What's the ignition source there? It's
there are some possible ignition sources, aren't there, in some of the cases, but like there aren't in others. So it's there was the one where I read about where there was a college girl as well, where she was just like walking with her mates from one lesson to another. I think like mid-morning, and apparently they saw some kind of like sort of spark came down from like above, something like that. So this, hence the ball lightning theory maybe, and like came down and hit her, and then she just was spontaneously combusted and went up in front of a friend. So another witness case that I managed to find, but not much detail on the case itself really.
It almost sounds like lightning. You can get lightning in virtual daylight, and sunny days very, very rarely. You can get bolts of lightning. A lot of the cases that you find, there is no accelerant, is there? But inside the body, a lot of the time there isn't a body to test. That's the big problem. There's significantly less body.
Acetone is probably the most flammable organic compound that we're
aware of,
suggested or hypothesized, and then looked to test in the laboratory. It could be
followed by fats, isn't it?
Sorry,
followed by fats. I would say after acetones, So found on the body or inside the body, the answer to that would be naturally occurring ones, yeah. But as Jay said, because of the extent to which a lot of the, for want of a better word, victims are found, it's very difficult to test because they're often just left with, bits of lower legs from the knees down, or feet, and a skull which is shrunk to the size of an orange. So I suppose it's difficult to conduct any kind of autopsy on it where you can validate.
That's the bit I can't quite get my head around. I know some things shrink when they burn, because as the moisture burns off, things they shrink down. But a skull and bone shouldn't do that. Not to the point where they go from a melon to an apple.
You've got fat, haven't you, in the bone marrow? That's essentially another form of fat. Does the intense heat and the rapid melting of the bone marrow and the fat cause a cavity in the? But the skull's not going to have too much bone marrow in it, really, is it? That's more like your main limbs.
On top of which, there's there've been many fires throughout history that we know, and there's been victims of, and this type of thing doesn't happen. The skull doesn't shrink; it falls apart, it breaks apart, or there's the suture lines, if you like, or the stress, the fractures that are in the skull from birth, and the access holes for the blood vessels and nerve endings. It doesn't just. There's no reason why it should shrink. That's one. That is, again, that's. I agree with Jay on that one. That's the one part, no, not the one part of it, but the main part of it. What I can't wrap my head around really is why the skull would shrink.
Maybe they need to build a super crematorium where they, instead of heating them up to 1800 degrees, it's like a super creme and it goes up to like 5,000 degrees, and they just test the skull shrink at higher temperatures. Because really, we don't actually have any other experimentation probably of what happens to human skulls at any temperatures higher than what our crematoriums go to. So if this SHC is significantly higher in temperature, then perhaps we've just not even tested for it yet.
But if the spontaneous human combustion thing is happening and it's the body burning that allows it to get to that temperature, then surely any accelerant we add, regardless of how hot it burns, that should still trigger the effect. Right. But we don't see that.
You're spot on. You've uncovered the problem. What temperature can we? What is our maximum that we can create in a laboratory environment to test? And can it get
more
near
importantly,
these temperatures?
What's the maximum that a human body can produce with its composite elements? Because we're led to believe that it's spontaneous combustion with no outside source of ignition or accelerant or fuel, for that matter. So what are the different things that we're made up of? What are they capable of? What temperatures are they capable of burning at? Because that's what will be responsible for shrinking the skull, not the surrounding environment, because the environment is largely untouched.
That's true. Yeah, it would be. Yeah, okay. I don't know how we'd figure that one out. You'd almost need to, if you could instantly incinerate somebody, what temperature would you require to do that? You've got to be talking probably as hot as the surface of the sun, or going into the center of the sun to get those levels of temperatures, and we just can't produce those in labs.
I'm not going to tell you any details on this, so don't ask. But I'm aware of. It was 33 bodies, basically, that were burned, and they were burned down to the bone. So there was no meat left on the bodies. None of their heads shrunk.
No.
And that was burned, and that was burned for long enough, and with a thing that like I said, it was burned down to the bone.
But that'd probably just be normal crematorium, 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. Burn it all down. A few fractured bone fragments left. Yeah. Pulverized down.
You couldn't. Every time we tried to remove them, sort of thing, they just broke. They just turned to dust. So
The thing in a crematorium is it's normally the front part of the skull and the occipital bones, areas like that are left intact and have to be ground down. And that's it in a crematorium. So the rest of it will fall apart or will partially burn. So we know that at temperatures up to 1,600 that should happen. The skull should fall apart, because that's another thing. These skulls are found intact, they're not broke open. They found shrunk to the size of an
shrunken
orange of a teacup.
intact.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like
That's the
movies.
hardest thing to explain, isn't it? Sorry.
No.
No, yeah, but it's not like a movie, is it, where you see a skeleton like you would have like in a bio lab, just black and like. It's not like that when a body burns.
No.
All the sinew and stuff that holds the bones together, that burns more quickly, and like you said, it breaks apart. The chest, the bit in the front there, it's much softer. It's more like it's like a plasticky bone, isn't it? It burns. It breaks away. It's
That's,
the
that's
heart
right.
doesn't burn well at all. The heart is terrible. It's such a tough.
Yeah,
So
very
it
tough
doesn't burn.
muscle. Well, the toughest muscle in the body, isn't it?
Yeah, but you're not seeing any of these chest cavities with any bits of people's hearts left, are you? You're just pretty much not seeing a chest cavity anymore. You're just seeing two legs from the mid-thigh down. And that's probably in the cases where they've been sat on a chair and they've been quite big and they've probably fallen back off the chair, so the legs have gone away from the main point of ignition on the torso, on the body, and that's probably why they've not burnt, probably in some of these cases as well.
That's an interesting point. Sorry, you did say his name, Dave, didn't you? But Hequibus, what's his actual name? Scott. That's an interesting point Scott makes. But I would actually go a bit further than that. How many cases in history do you think that we know of that you consider that a myth has been built around that could actually be maybe spontaneous human combustion or whatever it is that we're talking about in a more that they might actually have a natural cause sort of thing? When things like this used to happen back in the day, 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, it wouldn't go into history. It would go into myth.
Yeah.
This could be as old as time.
Is there
I keep trying to think of a biblical story. You've got
That's
the burning
exactly
bush,
where my
things
head
like
was
that.
going with it too. That is this not in the Bible somewhere?
I think
It
is.
sounds like the type of thing that would be.
I'm sure
It might be even where myths of
Hold
like
on.
hell came from.
Well, this is
about
it.
Fire
Yeah.
and burning.
Have you guys ever seen that place in Eastern Europe where it's that pit that caught on fire and it's been burning for like 100 years?
Yeah,
They
I know
call
the
that
one what you're talking about. Yeah.
Devil's Gate. That's an interesting place.
Yeah.
It must be things like that place and like the odd case of spontaneous combustion in the past that fueled a lot of these
Myths.
ideas for hell, Satan, and
Yeah.
possibly.
1641, Scott, I believe 1641 or 1643. I believe 1641 was the first case on record.
What was it?
Steve, you've been without audio for a long time now. I thought you were doing it deliberately. Have you muted yourself or? We heard a click.
Is that better?
Yeah, you're back.
Oh, really?
back.
I need new headphones. Sorry, guys.
Go on Amazon. They'll get there tomorrow.
Of course, there are other places you can buy them from too.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, yeah. We're all lazy and want cheap, so he will end up ruling the world.
Oh yeah.
Jeff
He
Bezos.
started to open shops.
All hail Bezos.
You see, he has a system that everybody loves and has destroyed the high street, and now he started to open shops. It's like, oh, for God's sake, man.
He's gone full circle. He's put them all out of business.
Backwards.
Now he's bought up all their property really cheap. Now he's opening back up again. That's how the wealthy have been keeping all the wealth for generations, mate.
Works.
That sounds all right. Yeah.
No, it's exactly. You just look back at history. That's exactly how they've done it.
Yeah.
Crash the market, buy it all up cheap.
Boom.
Well,
Right,
that's
so-
how you control.
Before we change the subject completely, it's vampires, though, right? Is that what we've
Yeah,
agreed?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
I'm
Nice.
totally convinced that that's exactly what it is. Which brings us on to obviously the where we end up is what do we think? What do we think on the panel before we draw this to a suitable conclusion? Let's go clockwise as we're looking at the panel. Dame, hit me, baby. What do you think about it?
I think most likely. I think the energy levels for subatomic processes are probably too much and not necessary. I think it's probably some kind of runaway metabolic process related to acetone and production in the body, your diet, and perhaps the failure of the regulatory the system in the body combined with some of the chemical processes creating that runaway heat heat source and it not needing an ignition source and it just igniting because it goes above the ignition point of a human being. And that's probably why they don't feel anything, because I think a lot of these people they're probably already dead by the time that they're on fire.
Jay?
I would argue exactly the same. I think that the between the acetone, possibly the wick effect, I think this is incredibly rare. So I think it's probably not. It's going to be one of those things. It's not one or two causes. This probably requires a few factors. You know, it requires the planets to align a little bit. And when you've got somebody that's maybe diabetic, that's overweight, that's got this acetone thing, that's got the right sort of clothing, falls asleep in the wrong place, or maybe has a, you know, I think it's going to be one of those things that, yeah, it requires a few things to line up. It doesn't explain some of the causes. Some of the stories where we are talking about people that spontaneously combust walking down the street. I think that one you mentioned earlier with a student sounds like if she was struck by lightning, which I can imagine does happen occasionally, and they do burn from the inside out. But I think that I think there's a lot of the famous cases that we're talking about where you just see a foot and things. I think it's like Damian's got a spot on. It's going to be some sort of metabolic chain reaction effect. You then have some sort of ignition. At sometimes, other times I don't think so. Not necessary, and we burn like a candle.
I like the point you made about lightning and how about when someone gets a lightning strike, they might appear to have like burned from the inside, because it's like it's messed with the electrical charge system in your body, hasn't it? And it's caused a massive imbalance.
Doesn't the lightning literally go through the bone first? So you literally burn from the inside out.
Oh, does it? Okay, right. Okay.
Because your bone is technically, calcium's a metal, isn't it? So that's why if you stick your bone through it creates a better
conductive part, isn't it?
Of course,
that's the better it goes through. So the lightning goes through. That's why you get burns that literally, when they go through the feet and you get like this light. It looks like lightning, the burns do, as they go through the flesh, sort of thing.
But then surely they know when they've got a body then from a lightning strike victim, that they can tell the difference between that and a spontaneous human combustion then, because it would be very different.
I think you'd be able to, I think so. Yeah.
In terms of, I'm just trying to pick. Unless I don't know. I haven't seen any lightning. Now I'm going to have to go look at all the lightning survivors.
But unless in some injuries, a lot of people survive lightning strikes. I mean, it's like they have a heart attack or something like that. They actually survive the lightning strike. But I'm just wondering, is if like we're talking about there's certain circumstances people can set alight because of acetone or something like that, whereas sometimes if they get struck by lightning, very rarely that can happen. But you then might not know it because the body's burned. The evidence might not be there, sort of thing. But I just think it's going to be one of those stories that it's when this does happen and it's genuine, and I think there's going to be a lot of stories out there that aren't really genuine.
No, like everything, of course, people will lie. But surely someone's got a video on with a camera phone too. Like someone's going to have to catch somebody like catching on fire and get the camera out immediately. Yep, got it. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then they're going to have a 10-minute video.
That was that picture that I shown earlier.
Yeah,
that was a still from a video, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So that. Yeah. So I suppose we just in today's digital world, we're always going to be questionable, aren't we? Like we were of that one.
People with security cameras in their houses. Whether it's at some point, someone's going to catch it.
I suppose that the lightning thing's going to hold up outdoors, isn't it?
Yeah.
Most cases, people are indoors when it's happened. They're found in the bed or sat in a chair. So.
Yeah, which is very antithetical to it being lightning. It doesn't really, it doesn't line up unless it's some kind of floating ball lightning that goes down chimneys or through walls, which is again a little bit less believable than.
Scott. Damo, you sort of covered this, didn't you?
What's that?
Somebody did about somebody getting they had an injury that sort of burnt them in the chest as if it had been a small explosion and the hand burnt off or something. Is it?
Yeah,
somebody survived.
Yeah, there was it was that what was his name again now? Was it Mr. Baker? I think it was, wasn't it?
Baker,
yeah. No, Mr. Baker was the one that was set on fire, wasn't he, in his lounge, and he did. I don't know the extent of his injuries, but he was only the sort of the partial one. It was the guy from '74 that said something had exploded out of his chest with a big hole. The Jack Angel.
Okay.
Did he had holes in his back as well?
Yeah,
was he possibly said not shot with a shotgun or something? Or
well, yeah,
I think he would remember being shot by a shotgun.
Also, there's a big difference in there between a burn and a bloodshot wound. You know, you've got a bloodshot wound, you've probably got blood going everywhere. You've got a burn hole, you've just got a big cavity that's burnt a hole of you away, and then you've got burn marks. Or you know, I don't know. I think it'd be very
with a gunshot
different.
wound. You've also normally got somebody with a gun shooting at you too. That's sort of needed for that theory, really.
Yeah,
Well,
but if you
yes.
Just saying,
he can't
you need
remember.
somebody to shoot.
You can't
Well,
remember.
You know, he can't remember, can he? So
Sounds like plasma,
Minutes, I don't
something
know.
like that to me.
A gunshot wound is very specific.
yeah,
It's very easy to identify.
It's normally shrapnel, bits and bobs as well.
yeah.
You can tell by the soft tissue injury, the permanent and temporary cavitation, whether it's high velocity, low velocity. So it's they can tell. Steve, what do you think it might be? What are you saying?
The same as the other two lads. Excuse me. It
The
has
other
to
three.
You haven't said what you think yet.
Yeah.
Couldn't possibly
yeah,
suppose that you were going to say the same, Dave.
Yeah.
Telling you what you think.
Yeah, it has to be something like biological down to a molecular sort of level, and it has to be like Jamie was saying a minute ago, certain things all clicking into place at the same time for it to happen. So yeah, I don't think it's aliens, although obviously.
When you're on about Steve, it's always aliens.
Always aliens. Well, I was going to say the case of that dude with the big hole in his chest and things like that. The first thought that come to my mind was cattle mutilation. It reminded me of cattle mutilation, but I don't know.
Yeah, if it was like surgically removed pieces of his flesh, but not bits that look like they've been incinerated and then got his like crispy new edge to him. Do you know what I mean? Like it's slightly
That's
different.
the thing, isn't it? You know, when it comes to
something.
cattle mutilations, the
nothing,
incisions or the cuts are like self-cauterized, look like they've been made with a laser or whatever. Certain areas are targeted, whether it's the sphincter, you know, the rectum, things like that, so on and so forth. But
maybe it was an alien apprentice. He just wasn't very good at it.
Yeah, just really poor at his job.
Like, Alf was looking over going, what the have you done?
It was a rogue TIG welder. It should have been a MIG welder, really.
Or maybe, as our religious texts hint to, we've got some gods, plural, or extraterrestrials, and some of them are just not that nice. Like some humans are not that nice. And maybe they've got weapons that they just play around with for fun sometimes, and they just pop some humans off, like we go on Call of Duty or Battlefield. And it's nothing to them, because it's like us stepping on an ant.
Using a magnifying glass on an ant.
Maybe it's that.
A bit literal, but
no, very apt. That would be the most closely associated, I suppose, wouldn't it?
Excellent, it's aliens.
So there we go. We've got back to aliens.
When you start to throw things in like that, you start to sort of like add more mystery rather than coming to explanations or answers for it. Because I've seen this kind of thing occur when people have discussed cryptids and Bigfoot and things like that by saying, well, it's interdimensional, and aliens have added them there. It's like, all you've done now is compound the issue by adding more things that need investigation and that are more difficult to prove.
Yeah,
I'm only joking, really.
Yeah, I don't think it's aliens at all.
We can always get back to them in one way, shape, or form.
It's not like a signature thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've already said the Nazis did it. So we've had Nazis, we've had aliens. If we can somehow think of sharks, we can get this video on history too.
Megalodon.
You absolutely got to remember. I mean, what was he called there? Dr. Evil. Sharks with laser beams on the head.
With
you not remember?
freaking laser beams.
Sharks with laser beams.
Laser beams on their head. I mean, they could shoot somebody in the sternum and blow their hand off, I suppose. Land sharks, Steve. It's possible. Don't doubt
Couldn't
it.
afford the sharks.
Land sharks.
Land sharks.
Couldn't afford the sharks. We've got some halibut.
Oh,
Some
We
angry
had to buy
halibut.
the sharks just for the halibut. So, Steve, are you
there's
are you
no place for
with,
that. Hey.
Are you agree? What?
There's no halibut sharks. There's no place. Oh, never mind.
I'm
I
not
can't
dead.
believe this is
I'm
live.
just very badly burned.
Here we go. Oh my God!
Oh,
I can't believe I'm herring this.
Yeah.
oh,
So you agree with Damian and Jay then that you think it's an internal metabolic thing?
yeah, definitely. watch Dave come out with some epic thing now. to blow it all
Absolutely
up.
not. I have
Oh,
got
I
no
thought you was gonna
manoeuvring
say
room.
absolutely.
No manoeuvring room whatsoever on this one because it's
It's
just
bizarre.
so bizarre. I also can't think of it being anything other than what you three have sort of like alluded to. I mean,
We haven't
it's
really
such a
we haven't really confirmed anything. We've just kind of like gone, well, we think it's linked to this.
we've actually
Maybe.
spent the last 2.25 hours doing nothing whatsoever apart from stating the obvious. That's all we've done. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We haven't got a clue what we're talking about. Next
We'll be
week
back
for
to
more
do the same
absolute
next
madness.
week, guys.
Oh, wait till I
so-
tell you what I'm thinking about doing for next week. It's going to be all of the same.
Oh, don't worry, the floor is yours in a minute.
Yeah.
So
Go on, Alexa.
basically, I think it's I think it has to be something like that, doesn't it? Or due to the severity of the injuries or the severity of the burning, that it's just difficult to tell the reason for it occurring. That's my only go-tos, because I don't think it's anything. It's weird and wonderful in its own right, without anything weird and wonderful needing to be added to it as a cause. Like I say, correlation isn't causation, so you can't just jump onto this, that, and the other being responsible for it because it matches a certain narrative. So I would also be likely to agree with everybody else on the panel, I'm afraid. So, Jay, what have we got in store for next week? This is your time to shine, brother. Go for it. Where are we at?
I've had 2 hours of shining.
Really? Where?
Every
What?
freaking week.
Yeah,
It means,
It's like-
it only means that light off his forehead. Look.
Oh, right.
Oh,
Damian.
Sorry,
bless.
just as you said that, I just really noticed it. I was just like,
Going. I'm
oh,
not
I've had
bald.
a couple of quick
I'm
ones.
solar
tonight.
powered.
On it, lads.
solar powered.
What have we
We've
got?
got a choice, guys, as always, because we can either do something I think runs off what we've done this week, and we can talk about reincarnation, or we can do Project Stargate, the military's attempt to investigate paranormal and try to weaponize the paranormal. So
Quite like both of those topics.
I'll throw it out to you guys. What do you fancy doing next week? And if anybody wants to put a comment up quickly, you'll have to be quick.
Reincarnation.
Type, damn it, type. Reincarnation for you, Stevie. Okay. Dave, you have a
Stargate for me.
Stargate project.
Mm.
Dave, Damian, you've got the deciding vote, mate.
Oh, that makes it difficult, doesn't it? Because I decide what we do. I sort of like both. I think
You have to have
reincarnation
an opinion.
probably links in quite well to this, because you can start talking about all the chakra points and world religions and all believe in reincarnation. Or we can go completely down a different one. Maybe we should do. I'll say reincarnation because it links on. It links on well
Okay.
from this one.
And then 2 weeks after that, we'll do Project Stargate. Boom,
Okay.
done.
2 weeks
Okay.
after that, it'll be my turn. Because you're away
No, 2
for a
weeks
week.
after I next week, and then 2 weeks after next week.
What date's that again now? Yeah, okay, yeah. I don't know. I don't plan that far ahead.
The week I get back, I get back from my holiday that day, so I'm literally going to be still in my hat and suntanned with a
Holiday
sangria in my hand.
So-
I want to
so-
be on
so-
holiday.
Sombrero in your drink still, yeah.
Sombrero in my
One
drink,
on your head as well.
From my drink. Yeah.
Looking like a sort of shrimp / lobster.
No,
pink.
by my reckoning, we're sort of on level pegging there with the panel and the people in the side chat regarding Stargate and reincarnation, without wanting to throw a spanner in the works.
There you go. That's the next 2 videos then. So next week, reincarnation. 3 weeks from today, Project Stargate. There you
Right.
go.
So next week, Doodah,
Reincarnation.
reincarnation on Jay's channel, so on Damian there. So brief history and mystery, and then the week after will be a week off.
Possibly.
and then the week
That's
after
my week off, definitely.
The week after that will be back. Here.
I'm really looking forward to my holiday. I'm sorry, but I am.
Yeah, so are we, because it means you can fuck off for a few days and I'm going to put up with you.
Right,
we'll
Dave.
do the live stream from my holiday. I'll sit on the beach and do it.
That will be absolutely fun. Sat
That
there
would
with a
be really good.
sangria.
Yeah. What do you
Yeah,
think, Jake?
yeah.
I don't give a fuck. I'm on holiday.
That'll be perfect.
I think the weather here is much nicer than the weather there. That's all it is.
Oh.
The shyest comment there, but I only said Stargate because I can't spell reindeer.
It's funny he is. I like it.
That's brilliant.
He's a funny fella.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Oh.
So next week we got reincarnation. Thanks to all the people that have ruined it by voting for that. Thanks very much. I know absolutely nothing about that, but then none of us do, and that's why we do this, I guess. Thank you from me.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks
from
from
me.
me. They've,
Thanks, guys. We'll see you.
Stay shy, eh? You know, is that a keyboard stammer you've got going there with reindeer?
I'll quickly say this before he brags about it in his own right. Congratulations to Steve to making it to 1,000 subscribers, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Well done,
Oh,
mate.
yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I
last
didn't know,
night. Thank
mate.
you.
Well
So,
done.
Cheers,
Yeah.
lads.
well done. Now we can get the
Cheers, Dave.
community tab going and he can beg people for money like I do.
Yeah.
So that should be interesting. for him. He should just-
I know I do this every week, but can I just ask people to unsubscribe because that would be funny?
No,
Okay.
no.
Well done, mate. I know how much
Cheers,
hard
buddy.
work you put into it. Seriously, really well done. It's
cheers,
a bitch of a milestone to hit. We all
It
know.
is. Yeah, it
We're
is.
all there.
Yeah, really happy.
Good man.
So thanks to everybody for joining us in the side chat. It's massively appreciated, as we've said numerous times, and the reason we keep saying it is because it's the truth. Is you make the show, you make we're here to chat about things we enjoy doing. Yes, but we enjoy chatting in front of you and getting the input from you people. So we do appreciate that. Thanks to everybody else who's joined me on the panel tonight. The good old mystery machine. I really enjoyed it. Anybody want to add anything else before we disappear?
Yeah, please join the Mystery Machine group on Facebook. I'm sure one of
Nice.
our mods. Do we have mods?
Yes, because this is still a channel.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Sorry. It's been a long week, Dave. I'm really sorry. For
You yourself are a mod on this channel.
Yeah.
Steve.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Although, given the fact that you don't know that, means you might not be by the end of this stream.
Yeah.
But as things stand at the
He
minute,
takes his responsibilities very
very
seriously.
seriously, yeah.
Just search Mystery Machine. I'm sure you'll find us.
Am I coming? Am I going? Have I been here? Where am I?
Unbelievable.
Someone should moderate this shit. Yeah, you, Steve.
Pay
Oh.
attention to it. Unbelievable.
Oh,
that was-
brilliant.
brilliant.
I'm laughing too hard. I can't stop now, Dave.
Oh, I'm boiling now. I'm going to burst into flames.
That was brilliant. Right, okay, so thanks everybody. We will catch you next week. So if you're not already subscribed, subscribe to the individual channels: Brief History and Mystery, Stranger Times, Mudlarking, Paranormal. More of a mouthful than he is possibly in the physical sense. We'll say that much. But Stranger Times, subscribe to Steve. He's got 1,000 now. We don't really need to. I agree with Jay on sub. But subscribe to Brief History and Mystery, and make sure you click the bell so that you get notifications. So you know when Brief History and Mystery is going live. You've also got another channel, Jamie. I'll plug it on your behalf, even though you don't like Americans. What's it called again? Do you want to tell people about it?
I love Americans, and I'll have you know that 70% of my viewers on that channel are American. So you, look, brothers from another mother, my cousins from across the pond.
That's what we
Love
like
you
to
guys.
see.
We're going to have to do a
What's
comedy
your channel,
sketch
brother?
at some
Tell us
point.
My
about the other
Sidetrack channel, Sidetrack. So yeah, if you just literally side with a hyphen track, go and find me on Facebook as well. I'm always on the Brief History Mystery channel.
Plug it. Sidetrack is about, for
Talking
those
about-
who don't know.
Yeah, talking about sci-fi, TV, movies. To be fair, because it's my channel, anything I actually want to talk about.
Yes. That's absolutely the one.
But
Anything
yeah,
I say, damn
TV
it.
and movies. TV and movies. Lots of. I put all the adverts, new films adverts on there, and all sorts. Good fun.
So if
Good
you-
fun channel.
Yeah, and it's been doing really well, hasn't it? In the short time you've had it going, you've really bumped up the
Yeah.
views and the subs. So
Gone past 8 weeks, and I'm pushing 3,000 subscribers. So it's been really nice.
Wow.
People have really enjoyed it.
it's
Amazing,
all of
mate.
them could migrate to something decent like what we're doing, but no, we want
No.
this in sci-fi.
It's never going to be migrated. It's just popular shit, mate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mainstream crap.
Let's It's done well, hasn't it? Get credit where credit's due. It's done absolutely great. So sub to Sidetrack as well. You've got a Facebook page?
I have got a Facebook page, yeah. Again, just Sidetrack, just Google that. But obviously, I share all our stuff on Mystery Machine as well.
Absolutely wonderful. So show your
Fantastic.
support to everybody else. Thanks very much for being here, and thanks to the panel as well. Catch you next week over on Brief History and Mystery for Reincarnation. We'll do it again the following week and the week after that.
We've already done it 100 times before. Enjoyed it every time.
Take it easy, everybody. Be safe, be good, be cool.
See you
Good
next
night.
week.
Good night,
Be
guys.
serious.
Cheers. Take care.